folks. Jeff Salzman here, and welcome back to the Daily Evolver. It's Monday, November 27th, 2017, and I hope my fellow citizens of the States at least had a good Thanksgiving weekend. I know I did, and it's good to be back. And I'm here with Corey DeVos, Editor-in-Chief of Integral Life. Hey, Corey.
Hey, Jeff. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. So today, I want to talk about my continued daily evolving on this issue of trying to integrate the piece of the truth of our culture's nationalists. And, you know, that's an integral project. And it's not just happening in the U.S. It's happening all through the world in a sense, but certainly in the first world, in the leading developed world, we have, of course, Brexit in Great Britain. We have political turmoil in the last week in Germany, largely over immigration. We have a couple of weeks ago 60,000 Poles marching in Warsaw. 60,000 is a lot. You know, and you have to notice that. You have to, you know, pay attention to that. And we have a new right-wing chancellor in Austria, this Sebastian Kurz, who's 31 years old. And I don't know a lot about him, but he said something that I actually liked. It sounded kind of integral to me. He said, it's not about letting immigrants in. It's about acculturating them when you do, so that the positive character of Austria or the country can endure. So, you know, that's who Austria got. We got the booby prize here in America with the election of Donald J. Trump as the president of the United States. I still have a hard time wrapping my head around that. But, you know, it's not just, you know, the advanced democracies. We see Hungary, Russia, Turkey, even China. You know, she is bringing back the traditional Chinese religions and, you know, focusing on a sort of Chineseness that people want. And what it is, you know, from an integral perspective, it's a certain flinching back or retreating from the headlong rush that cultures were taking into modernity in terms of globalism in the lower right-hand quadrants. That's the exteriors of the collective. That's our system. So we have this global system where all of a sudden I am competing with a Chinese person for wages, you know. And then on the lower left, the interior of the collective in quadrant theory, we have multiculturalism, the postmodern contribution, where, you know, diversity is seen as a virtue in and of itself. And it is, in a way, but it has to be integrated. Anyway, what we're seeing is that traditionalists and early modernists, who sort of have a center of gravity or of a self-sense of traditionalists, are saying enough. You know, we've gone far in that direction. It's time that we want our countries to matter. And you know, it's just something that we can see developmentally that national identity for traditionalists is a bigger part of their personal identity than national identity is for modernists. But by the time we get to modern, you know, fully, patriotism, it's quaint. You know, it might be something we do in the 4th of July, but, you know, it doesn't have the deep meaning that it does for traditionalists. For a lot of traditionalists, being an American is one of the best things of their life, about their life. And that's true for people all over the world. They all love that identity. By the time, of course, you get to postmodernity, as most of us liberals are, patriotism and stuff like that, it begins to be not just quaint, but embarrassing. And even pernicious. I mean, you know, one of the projects of, you know, certainly advanced postmodernity is the deconstruction of these, you know, myths of national triumph and, you know, superiority. And it's a good thing, actually. But, you know, so it's all in the mix here. But I have to say that I'm one liberal who's glad to be pulled back a little bit into seeing and reappreciating what I thought that we had sort of transcended. And we can't transcend it until we really include it. And so maybe it's not even being pulled back as much as it is being pulled forward into a new kind of world-centric nationalism, an every country exceptionalism. And I actually like that. And, you know, I want to see it. I'm no great traveler, but I've traveled around, and of course, you know, I'm a citizen of the world, you know, big postmodern identity. But there's something that I see when I go to these countries like Germany. There's a Germanness that is palpable and beautiful. I mean, you know, we all have our histories, but there's a beautiful side to that, to Italianness, and just feel the shift as we move into the feeling of Italianness, Mexicanness. You know, there's this new movie Coco that's like the big hit this last weekend, the Pixar movie about Mexico, and I'm excited to see it. Canadianness, you know, it's real. It's something. You know, I had this long weekend for Thanksgiving, and you know, I was home a good bit and cooking and stuff, and I got into this show that I'd heard about, but I had no idea how you know, magnetic it was for me. The Great British Baking Show, and it's this, you know, reality show where they have these 12 British people who are out in this tent in this beautiful British estate. I mean, it's just sylvan, it's just fabulous. And there's a creek and the whole thing is big tent. And they all have this like kitchen island with an oven and so forth. And they do this sort of gentle competition where they cook scones and pies and tea cookies. And, you know, they don't all have perfect teeth, and they all have sort of a British sense of humor. And it's just so, and one of them's Indian, and she brings sort of the spicy side to things. And one of them sort of gets voted off at the end, but yet it's all very loving and very civilized. And I watched 6 of them this weekend. And there's many more. I mean, there's many seasons, and I'm so excited that I have the show. So it's just this sort of infusion of Britishness that I appreciate. And I don't want that to be homogenized away. And that's not even to mention getting into, you know, something like Nigerianness. The New York Times had an article a few days ago about the new young writers coming out of Nigeria, and how they're not just writing for foreigners, they're writing for their own people. The first wave of Nigerian writers tried to explain Nigerianness to white people, but these people are writing for their own people. And they were talking about some of these books, and it's like, I can't wait to get my hands on them, you know. And so anyway, there's all of it. Iranianness, Japaneseness, everything has a texture, everything has a flavor that we don't want to be homogenized away. And even if we did, and maybe some of us did and still do, you know, the multicultural, you know, when you really think that that is the way, our more traditional sisters and brothers are not going to let us. That has become apparent. So, you know, the challenge is to, you know, integrate them more than they integrate us. You know, that's always a dicey one. But also, I think one of the most difficult challenges is that, you know, we live in a culture that is currently quite polarized. We're at a culture war, and it's right on schedule in a way, and it's nothing to be alarmed about as long as it stays peaceful, and I think it will. But which side of the 50-yard line you're on really matters. So if you get associated, for instance, with nationalism, with the positive side of nationalism, then you're in the same side of the street as the racists. And, you know, I shrink away from that. And so it's sort of dicey to live in and feel in to the piece of the truth that traditionalists have without buying the rest of it. and, without getting associated or afraid of the rest of it. And, just as I was sort of sorting this out, I got this email from one of my wonderful listeners, Petty Heipel. And she says, Jeff, I'm just sending you my integral pondering for the day. So this is what she sent me. It's just a paragraph. She said, something we talk a lot about in the integral community is the capacity to see the value in different worldviews and perspectives, and that everyone has a piece of the truth. I've been noticing lately too, that it seems everyone also has a piece of falsehood or ignorance. So a challenge for me has been discernment. Excuse me. I think we can easily tend to overly adore someone and believe everything they say without discernment. Or on the other hand, completely dismiss everyone someone shares because some part of what they are sharing isn't true or shows ignorance. It's so easy to make someone totally right or totally wrong in our minds and either miss their wisdom or miss where they may be mistaken. And I love that. I wrote her back, I said, Petty, you took me into new territory, and I mean it. And I think this is part of this thing that I'm trying to sort out, and I think a lot of us are, about integrating so that we can move forward bigger, more grown up. So now I want to, try that on with one of the great villains of, at least in liberal culture, one of the great demons of liberal culture, and that's Ann Coulter. And she wrote a column criticizing Trump from the right. And it's interesting, her worldview, her perspective from the right, because she's not a Republican and never Trumper, like the William Crystal and the guys that, the Weekly Standard and, the sort of establishment. She's actually criticizing him from the right, that he's actually not doing anything on his nationalist agenda. And I want to look at that and find the piece of the truth in there. And I think there is one. That's why, I'm going to share this column. I don't know when it was, in this last few weeks, at any rate. It was recent. And of course, any effort to de-demonize Ann Coulter is not going to be reciprocated, to say the least. I mean, literally, here's some of the titles of her books. The first, Demonic: How the Liberal Mob is Endangering America. So demonic, so there we are. Slander: Liberal Lies About the American Right. Guilty: Liberal Victims, in quote, and their assault on America. Treason: Liberal treachery from the Cold War to the war on terrorism. So, she's a culture warrior on the right against the evil liberals. She's also a big Trump fan. Her latest book, I have to say I do love the title, In Trump We Trust, E Pluribus Awesome, with an exclamation point. So, she makes, I saw it was like $8 million a year selling this point of view that she believes to her people. And she does it, of course, as you can see, in this sort of tradition of the provocateur, and provocateurs are always so offensive when they're on the other side, but when they're on our side, we like them. I always think of the merry pranksters of the left in the 60s, and that whole line of Jerry Rubin and, Steal This Book, and all of the stuff that lefties were doing to just sort of offend and get attention. I mean, it's a standard strategy for people who are feeling like they're being left out and not getting attention. Gays, for years, doing these gay pride parades. I've often mentioned this, but one of my favorite Onion headlines of all time, The Onion is one of our humor newspapers here in America, and it's very funny. And it was like a little newspaper, and on the front, it shows this gay rights parade. And there's the float with the guy and the assless chaps and the, feather boas and all this shit. And the headline is, Gay Rights Parade Sets Gay Rights Back 50 Years. And that's sort of what you think would happen. People would be like, I hate the gays, but they actually don't. They actually look and they see, and people were so curious about each other, we just can't stay out of each other's hair. So it actually moves the ball. So I want to, sort of give her a little provocateur space, because the truth is she's a serious conservative. And she has been, as she puts it, since kindergarten. She grew up in a Joseph McCarthy-loving household. She is a lawyer. She edited the Law Review at her college. I'm forgetting what college, but she worked for the Federalist Society when she graduated, a big conservative think tank, basically. And she is a very committed Christian. As she puts it, I'm a Christian first and a mean-spirited bigot of conservative second. And she says, Christianity fuels everything I write. Being a Christian means I am called upon to do battle against lies, injustice, cruelty, hypocrisy. All the virtues of the Church of Liberalism. So you can see that she's a holy warrior, and she actually is a holy warrior in the sense that there is some part of her that is down in this sort of red traditional, early traditional, where, well, I'll just read this. This is her most inflammatory line. This is what got her fired from the National Review, which is a conservative, respectable conservative magazine. This is what she wrote 3 days after 9/11, 2001, with the trade towers. She said, it's preposterous. She was talking about the screening at airports. It's preposterous to assume that every passenger is a potential crazed homicidal maniac. We know who the homicidal maniacs are. They are the ones cheering and dancing right now. We should invade their countries, kill their leaders, and convert them to Christianity. That's the line. She goes on, we weren't punctilious about locating and punishing only Hitler and his top officers. We carpet bombed German cities. We killed civilians. That's war, and this is war. And a lot of traditionalists, they resonate with that. I don't know about the kill their leaders and convert them to Christianity part. That's red, well, that's early traditional. But the idea of why America can't win a war when we did World War II and the whole thing, doesn't make sense to traditionalists because they don't really get moral evolution. And moral evolution says you can't kill civilians willy-nilly like we did. Now, there's a whole argument about that, but the truth is we don't win wars the way we used to because we don't have the stomach to fight them the way we used to, and that's progress. Anyway, her one of her statements, this is the one that got me. This is the one that made me hate Ann Coulter for years. This is about gay marriage. And she said, I think it was on Bill Maher's show, but it just got me. She said, nobody's stopping gays from getting married. Gays can marry anyone of the opposite sex that they want. Yeah, like you want me marrying your daughter. Anyway, but it turns out that actually Ann Coulter has this gay following of drag queens who do her, and she loves them. And there's this whole thing that is going on that she really loves the gays personally. So I don't know. Anyway, but here's one that she got a lot of flack for, and it's sort of an interesting koan to me. Here's what she said. She said, whites are called racists merely for mentioning the fact that current immigration law is intentionally designed to reduce their percentage of the population. Whites are called racist for merely mentioning the fact that current immigration law is intentionally designed to reduce their percentage of the population. And that is actually factually true. But it's just the product of what I think is an unexamined assumption that comes with the green world-centric view. I mean, I would read that and think, of course that's true, and I'm glad it's true. Because a world-centric view just sees the truth of diversity is better than conformity. And it actually is. It's, a higher stage of development where you start to turn and be friends with the people who used to be in your out group, and you literally get a bigger circle of people who are in your circle of moral consideration. But that's not true for traditionalists. They draw that circle closer. And so that's what we're dealing with. And, you know, they also hold this gold of our cultural heritage in a way that, you know, brings the reverence that it deserves. So this is part of the teasing apart of what I think we're doing as integralists. Because what we want as integralists is we want both. We want diversity and we want full cultural, I don't know, conformity is the right word, but the appreciation of what it is to be an American that everybody has in our case. So anyway, here's the column I was talking about. And this is it's titled Headlines from an Administration That's Not Putting America First. And here's what she writes. We are now nearly a quarter of the way through the entire Trump presidency. And depending on how the 2018 election goes, we could be at the halfway mark, because if the Congress turns Democratic, you know, any legislative initiatives of Trump is over. And she said, here are some headlines from that presidency. 1, defying Turkey, US decides to arm Kurds in Syria. 2, Iraqi leader in Washington gets Trump's assurance of US support. 3, Trump administration lifts sanctions on Sudan, citing progress. And 4th, Trump plans visit to Asia to buttress key Korea policy. She goes on, there are thousands of them, day after monotonous day. In the last 10 months, has a single manufacturing job been created in Trump's America? Has there been one opioid death avoided? Has 1 foot of the wall been built? What does a laid-off steelworker, his town drowning in Mexican heroin, think when he reads daily headlines like this? As Trump's peacemaker, Kushner finds common goals and friction in Mideast trip. Well, we didn't get the wall, but thank God it's pedal to the metal on resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. At the end of Trump's term, this is her, of course, at the end of Trump's term in office, I promise you, the Israelis and the Palestinians will not be living in peace and harmony. Let me say that again. At the end of Trump's term in office, I promise you, the Israelis and the Palestinians will not be living in peace and harmony. Kim Jong-un will not have called for democratic elections. ISIS, Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, and the Muslim head choppers du jour will not have suddenly become pro-life. The rest of the world will still be a God-forsaken cesspool. Wow. You know, it's funny. I feel sort of repulsed, but I also feel this old remnants of, yeah, we're America. My screw the rest of the world glands. You know, they start pumping. You know, so I could feel that. And then she goes on. That's why Trump's campaign slogan "To Make America Great Again" was such a hit. Beyond the self-evident attractiveness of a president caring about us instead of the rest of the world, fixing our country is at least something that's achievable. And I want to read that again. I think that really does hit at a piece of the truth. She says, beyond the self-evident attractiveness of a president caring about us instead of the rest of the world, fixing our country is at least something that's achievable. And it certainly is more achievable than fixing the world. She goes on, our tender ministrations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and 2 other countries has accomplished nothing good and all too often a lot that's bad. We haven't been able to get our leaders to focus on America's problems for 30 years. This is this globalism thing. The seduction of foreign policy is too great. Yet the rest of the world's problems will never be solved, but it seems so adult and serious to be working on them. If there was ever a presidential candidate who seemed immune to the siren song of foreign policy, we thought it was Trump. We voted for a reality TV star. We didn't want gravitas. So that's interesting. And, there's something I can agree with there. Our tender administrations, I would never agree in a million years that it has done no good. I think a lot of, foreign aid and so forth has done good. It probably has been wasted. There's better ways to do it. But in terms of the wars, I'm not so sure, and how does one turn one's back on, the rest of the world in a way that is, not really turning your back. So I think there's something there that's true. But what we're doing, of course, is always we're integrating so that we can move forward in a new, bigger view that includes the pieces of the truth of all of the integrated worldviews. And she actually talks about this later in the column. She talks about an integration that she fears is going to happen if the Democrats, her hated liberal opponents, start co-opting some of the message of Trump. And that would be an integration. And here's how she describes it. She says, Democrats realize that Trump's main campaign issues, immigration and trade, main campaign issues, immigration and trade. That's the cultural and the systems, the lower quadrants. That these were kryptonite to his opponents. The Democrats, the media, even Republicans threw everything they had at Trump. He still won. Democrats know how Trump did it. Unfortunately, they also know how to use the same kryptonite against him. You will notice that smart liberals are not saying, we need more pussy hats, more angry rhetoric, more Rachel Maddow conspiracy theories. No, the smart liberals are begging Democrats to steal the central components of Trump's death-defying campaign, immigration and manufacturing. Andrew Sullivan recently wrote in New York Magazine, this is Andrew Sullivan, I don't believe it's disputable at this point that the most potent issue behind the rise of the far right in America and Europe is mass immigration. It's a core reason that Trump is now president. And then she goes on, Andrew Sullivan called the Democrats' sudden decision to treat illegal immigrants as a beloved constituency constituted political suicide. And I'll read that again. She called the Democrats' sudden decision to treat illegal immigrants as a beloved constituency was political suicide. Then she goes on, this week, former Obama administration official Steve Ratner called on Democrats to abandon liberal shibboleths and focus on winning the votes of white working class men. Wage stagnation, he wrote in the New York Times, is our most pressing economic challenge. And then finally she writes, and of course, several months ago, the Democrats' meticulous pollster Stanley Greenberg produced a report telling Democrats that to beat Trump, they need to win back the nation's working class communities, starting in the formerly industrial states and the upper Midwest. So that's Ann Coulter sort of warning her fellow tribal Republicans that if you don't get your act together on these issues that Trump won on, the left is going to co-opt them. And they probably are in some way. That's, again, not as much either or, immigrant or no immigrant, wall or no wall, but just a bigger appreciation of the piece of the truth that people who believe that have, which is there is something precious about maintaining the culture of the country, and that we're not going to give that up easily. And it's sort of a new nationalism. And it's not the militant nationalism. This is where there's a confusion. It's sort of a pre-trans fallacy in a certain way. But it's not the militant nationalism that has, been all of human history, certainly since the, middle of the last century. The militant nationalism fueled, and tribalism fueled human history. But now, as we have in the center, at least center of gravity modern countries, we have a cultural nationalism that wants, that's the fight. Nationalism, cultural nationalism wants to be seen and respected and integrated. And, I'll take cultural nationalism over militant nationalism any day. It's progress. So, all right. So those are my thoughts for the day. And yeah, any thoughts on that, Corey?
Great episode, man. I always appreciate your willingness and even desire to transcend and include perspectives that I would probably negate in order to preserve my own sanity.
Negate and preserve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always,
No, it's true, isn't it?
Well, my question about Ann Coulter is always how authentic is she really? You know, and
Mhm.
that's sort of an ongoing liberal meme about her.
Right.
You know, how
Yeah.
much of what she expresses is just a caricature,
Yeah.
a role that she's playing to create controversy and you know, get book sales.
Yeah. That's true.
You know, I personally think that she does at her core believes what she's talking about, but you know, as you say, she's being very deliberately provocative.
Yeah. That's
And
true.
yeah, it's interesting to note the effects that, you know, folks like her and Alex Jones and you know, people like that, Sean Hannity,
Yeah.
Rush Limbaugh. You know, we're at the point now where they've so successfully othered liberals that, you know, liberals can often be seen as a greater threat to the nation than a foreign invasion or,
Yeah.
you know, so
Well,
it's.
that's certainly how, traditionalists see it.
Mhm.
And, it was one of the things that was interesting to me about Ann Coulter too, because I always thought that too, because, there's a vibe you get from Ann Coulter. She's sophisticated. She wears these little black dresses. She knows how to talk. She's very educated. You see her and she presents as somebody who's in our tribe.
Yeah.
She's not, some Southern, she's not hickish. She's not any of that. And yet she says these things that are, straight out of Red Amber.
Yeah.
About, killing their leaders and converting them to Christianity. Most of the time she's not that far off. But so that's sort of extra offensive to us liberals, because she's actually using, she's sophisticated, she's a good arguer, and yet she's saying these things that are, driving us crazy.
Yeah.
And, but what was interesting to me as I just, read a little bit of her background, she does believe it. She's believed it her whole life. She was that way in high school. She said from kindergarten. And, her faith, Christian faith, she's done some sort of testimony that it's just as authentic as anything I've ever heard. Even though, she has that sort of holy warrior attitude about kicking the ass of the people that she sees as evil, demonic, So it's really challenging. It really is. She's one of the, most challenging to me because, her gay thing always just sent me through the roof because it's personal. At that point, it's personal. So anyway, I don't know. I think she's, I think she, she's doing, as you said, she's doing both. She believes it, and she's also calibrating it beautifully to sell her books and to be, somebody who's making a lot of money and a big impact.
Yep. Same strategy as Trump, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Trump at his core believes more than he doesn't the things that he says, but he, deliberately hyperbolizes and makes it as provocative as he possibly can because he knows the game and he knows how to play the game.
I'm not so sure about if we talk about the two things, does he believe it and can he market it? We talk about Ann Coulter believes it and markets it well. I'm not sure about Trump. I mean, I think he sort of does now, or, he's talked himself into it. But if you see these interviews with Trump from the 80s and 90s, he was a good liberal.
Yeah, well,
he's pro-abortion. And
I think he thinks he believes it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think it's something like that because he's, he's almost pre-ideological, where it actually doesn't matter. It really, what matters is what milieu is he in, how can he dominate it, and if you're in the Upper West Side of New York, you talk like a liberal. You give money to Chuck Schumer. You support Hillary Clinton. He was a big proponent of Hillary Clinton's, when she was running against Obama. So it's something, these people. So anyway, well, thank you so much. And maybe we can just call it a day, huh, man?
I think so.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll check in tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Evolver. And I also want to say, before we close, that check out Integral Life's. They have a great Black Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whatever you want to call it, sale on various products. Corey, is there any ones you'd point out?
Yeah, so it's our 5-day holiday sale. We're on our second to last day today. Today you can get the Loving Completely web course with Keith Witt for 70% off. I love doing these holiday sales because we're able to cut the prices so low, which means more people, end up enrolling in the courses, and I think that's awesome. Keith's course, Loving Completely, is one of my absolute favorite things that we've ever done. It's amazing for couples who are in relationship with each other. It's amazing for individuals who want to be better and do better in relationships. It's a absolutely fantastic course. I encourage you all to check it out. You can go to integrallife.com/courses and you'll find it in there.
Loving Completely.
Loving Completely.
Yeah, and we love Keith. So yeah, check it out, folks. Okay. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Corey. See you tomorrow.
Bye, guys.